My name is Ellen Kaler, and I am the Executive Director at the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund. We are so pleased to announce the release of the Farm to Plate Strategic Plan Executive Summary, a 10-year roadmap for strengthening Vermont's food system, creating jobs, providing healthy and fresh food for all Vermonters. This action plan is dedicated to the hard-working farmers and food enterprises that supply nourishment to our bodies, create jobs for Vermonters, maintain our working landscape, and are the backbone of our communities. It is also dedicated to all the nonprofit organizations and state employees who work tirelessly to assist our farms and other food-related businesses. Today, we deliver this plan to Governor Shumlin, his team, and the Vermont legislature for their consideration. We respectfully request that you continue to provide important leadership and to be an active partner with the stakeholder community to implement this plan over the next 10 years. So how did this all come about? Well, over the past 10 years, we have seen a growing interest amongst consumers in buying local, caring about where their food comes from, who the farmers and entrepreneurs are that produce it, and how fresh, tasty, and nutritious it is. At the same time, a number of legislators, Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, Rural Vermont, Sustainable Ag Council, NOFA Vermont, UVM, and many others began calling attention to the growing interest around the new farms, the new farmers, the new businesses, the new jobs, and the new products being created in the farm and food sector. Even as Vermont's commodity dairy industry struggles mightily to survive against national milk pricing system that does not reflect their true cost of production, new value-added opportunities with higher margins, such as cheese and yogurt production, have been emerging. Then, in May of 2009, the Vermont legislature asked the Sustainable Jobs Fund to work with the Sustainable Ag Council, the Agency of Agriculture, farmers, entrepreneurs, and the rest of the food system community to create a 10-year plan. So over the past 18 months, we have engaged over 1,200 Vermonters through 8 local food summits, 24 focus groups, 6 day-long working sessions with 162 experts, a statewide food summit that drew 300 people in April to Rutland, over 250 individual interviews and meetings with over 75 food system organizations to identify the strengths and weaknesses, threats, gaps, and barriers to our current food system. And we particularly focused on identifying hundreds of opportunities for increasing the amount of locally produced food that is consumed by Vermonters and the region's 33 million consumers. While the VSJF staff has had the daunting task of assembling this plan, it is important to recognize that it is not the Sustainable Jobs Fund's plan. We have done our best to reflect the data, the trends, the hopes, and the concerns of Vermonters we spoke with. Today, we want to highlight just how big Vermont's food system is and what would happen if we invested more resources into expanding it. So this is our food system diagram here. As depicted in this diagram, the food system encompasses all steps in the process, from farm inputs, such as soil and seeds and water, to production, to processing, to wholesale distribution and storage, to retail outlets, such as restaurants, supermarkets, consumer food co-ops, schools, hospitals, and farmers markets, to the consumer, and then to nutrient management, such as on-farm and commercial composting that both feeds and rebuilds our soils. And then, of course, the circle completes by going back to farm inputs. The outermost ring of this food system diagram represents the incredibly diverse support system that helps farmers and food entrepreneurs in many ways. And those include policymakers, government agencies, nonprofit advocacy, program and technical assistance providers, trade associations, what else we got here? Educators and researchers, farm and food sector innovators, as well as capital providers, grassroots volunteers, as well as consumer education and marketing initiatives. All of these support systems are critical to the success of the folks that are inside making our farm and food enterprises that are actually producing the food that we all love to eat. So how many businesses and jobs are part of our food system? In total, we conservatively estimate that there are at least 10,974 businesses who collectively employ at least 55,581 Vermonters in the food system, and that represents 18% of all private sector jobs. Total economic output for Vermont's food system was $2.7 billion in 2007. Food manufacturing is the second largest manufacturing sector in the state, employing 4,356 people with an average wage of $37,600 a year. In fact, food manufacturing is only two of the manufacturing sectors that saw employment growth between 2007 and 2010. So how much do we Vermonters spend on food each year? Well, it's impossible to know for sure because the data just doesn't fully exist the way we want it to. We estimate that Vermonters and visitors spend over $2 billion annually on food. And Vermont leads the nation in direct agricultural sales, with $36.77 spent per capita at farm stands, farmers markets, and CSAs. But this is only the statewide average, because for those of you who trekked up here from Addison County, you are the leaders with $148 per capita spent on direct sales in 2007. And while this may seem like a small amount, it does represent a total of $23 million in direct sales in 2007, which is up from just $4 million 15 years earlier. So we're seeing a huge increase in folks wanting to eat local. On top of that, the Vermont Fresh Network estimates that their member chefs purchase $16 million in food from Vermont farms, and Vermont schools purchase over $2 million from Vermont producers. In total, we conservatively estimate that locally produced food accounts for at least 5% of total food purchases, or over $50 million annually in Vermont. Clearly, agriculture is not a dying industry, as some economists like to claim. We Vermonters like to eat good food. But not everything is rosy, and there is much work to be done. 12% of Vermonters are food insecure, and too many of our children do not have access to fresh, nutritious food to feed their growing bodies. Emergency food assistance organizations are serving an increasing number of clients. Food costs continue to rise, and the impacts of the recession linger as our income and buying power decrease. Many Vermonters, including farmers, are forced to make difficult choices, including making choices between food, shelter, and heat. And while the local food movement has provided access to an expanding market for Vermont producers, many farmers are not able to secure a reasonable standard of living for their families. That's on top of the latest dairy crisis, which saw conventional milk prices paid to farmers drop to their lowest levels in recent memory, and well below their cost of production. Dairy farms that were once fully paid for are now back in debt. Feed dealers report receivables greater than 90 days past due and are facing significant economic challenges to stay in business themselves. And just this morning, we learned that Pete Johnson of Pete's Greens in Craftsbury lost his barn and all of his storage crops, and his vegetable washing and processing equipment, and all of their storage space in an early morning fire. Fortunately, no one was injured, and Pete is part of a vibrant agricultural economy and community in the Northeast Kingdom, which will no doubt help him to rebuild. And yet, despite these challenges, there is much to be hopeful for. For instance, 413 new farms, most of them diversified farms, were created between 2002 and 2007. There are more young people entering farming again. A vibrant artisan cheese movement has developed and has been winning blue ribbons. Commonwealth Dairy in Brattleboro is nearing completion on a new yogurt manufacturing plant and chose to locate here because of Vermont's high-quality milk supply. There are more farmers markets and CSAs each year, and many are able to provide food year-round thanks to new season extension technology. Truly, economic opportunity exists in the food system like never before. So this Farm to Plate plan contains 33 goals and 60 high-priority strategies that support all the elements of the food system and are designed to harness the opportunities we see on the horizon that will lead to increased economic activity, jobs, and overall well-being for Vermonters over the next 10 years. Now, just a few quick examples of the kinds of goals included in the plan include that consumption of Vermont-produced food by Vermonters and regional consumers will increase from 5 to 10% of total food purchases. Agriculture will be advanced as the best use of prime ag land. Vermont's dairy industry will support supply management policies, in-state processing infrastructure, and diversification opportunities. Value-added food processors will be profitable, retain and/or add quality jobs. Vermont students will have increased opportunities to pursue careers in the food system, and food system entrepreneurs and farmers will have greater access to the right match of capital to meet their financing needs. The strategies that are outlined in the plan include opportunities for larger scale goat dairies to supply Vermont's growing cheese-making operations, the need to increase the scale of some diversified farms in order to meet the growing interests of buying local by hospitals and schools. They include opportunities to develop embedded farms within more suburbanized areas of the state, and the need for more meat processing infrastructure to serve increasing livestock production, to name just a few. So over the next 10 years, if the strategies contained in the Farm to Plate plan are implemented and significant private, philanthropic, and public sector investments are made to our food production infrastructure, if consumers continue to seek out and buy locally produced food, such as this amazing market basket of food that's on the table here of all Vermont products, we believe we can double our local food production and consumption from 5 to 10% of total food purchases. If we accomplish this goal, it would generate an additional $177 million annually in economic output, and this would boost total food system employment by 1,500 new private sector jobs over the 10-year period. And this measure does not include increased regional purchases of Vermont food. Markets like Boston and New York have real purchasing power and the potential to increase job creation and economic impacts are even more dramatic when we factor in those regional markets. It's truly going to take all of us working together, both inside and outside the State House, to get the job done. But given the incredible generosity of time, the excitement, and the passion that exists within our food system, and how many Vermonters contributed to this plan's creation, we firmly believe Vermont can make this happen. So as I mentioned, this has been an 18-month-long process, and the staff at the Jobs Fund has worked really hard to get to this day. So I'd really like to take an opportunity to thank a few people before we hear from Governor Shumlin. I'd like to thank Kit Perkins, Scott Sawyer, Heather Pepino, and Janice St. Ange, who are our staff, along with Nataka White, who's had to put up with all of us doing only Farm to Plate for so long, for their hard work, their long hours, their dedication to this project. I'd also like to thank the 9 researchers who worked on this plan, including Linda Berlin, Louise Calderwood, Dan Erickson, Greg Dragaklis, Doug Hoffer, Helen Laban-Jordan, Ginger Nickerson, Nick Rockler, Rachel Chapman, and Holly Tippett. I'd also like to thank the 15 members of the Farm to Plate process team, many of whom are here today, who met monthly and provided many insights and useful feedback, including Roger Albee, Marie Audette, Stacy Bernstein, Megan Camp, Guy Schwanier, Eric Clifford, Paul Costello, Brian Dunkiel, Amanda Ellis Thurber, Bill Schubart, Will Stevens, Ryan Torres, Steve Voigt, Tom Vogelman, and Enid Wanaka. In addition to the ERA and state general fund dollars provided in Act 54 and Act 78 over the past 2 years, it's also the case that without the generous support of Vermont's philanthropic community, this work would not have been possible, and I'd like to thank the Vermont Community Foundation, the High Meadows Fund, the John Merck Fund, the Growald Family Fund, the Eagle Ridge Fund, Castania Foundation, Vermont Health and Nutrition Fund, and the James B. Cook Charitable Trust. I'd also like to thank a few individual legislators who were particularly instrumental in securing state funding for this planning process, including former Representative Chris Bray, Representative Jason Lorber, Senators Vince Aluzzi, Tim Ash, Kinda Miller, Sarah Cattell, Representatives Bill Stevens, Carolyn Partridge, and Bill Botso. I'd also like to thank former Secretary of Agriculture Roger Albee, Diane Bothfeld, and all the staff at the Agency of Agriculture who helped to make this plan possible. It truly was a team effort. So we are so pleased that Governor Shumlin is able to join us today. We thank you for your commitment that you've already shown to grow Vermont's agricultural economy and the incredible team that you have put together within your administration. So would you like to come up and say a few words?